The Department of Justice just revealed bombshell news about Donald Trump's claim that undercover FBI agents played a role in the January 6th insurrection. And in just a minute, I'll reveal whether they agree or disagree. But first, let's backtrack and hear Donald Trump's theory about who did what that day, and then we'll learn about the just published results of the independent watchdog investigation.
Just very unfair. But those J6 hostages going to jail for 20 years and 18 years and 12 doctors, lawyers, carpenters, electricians, truck drivers. It's one of the saddest things. It'll go down as one of the saddest things in the history of our country. And they went there to protest a rigged election. And now when the facts are in, now they see it is a rigged election. You saw the numbers come out last week. It was a rigged election. And those people have to be, many of them, I guess there's some. By the way, there was Antifa and there was FBI. There were a lot of other people there too, leading the charge. Leading the charge. You saw the same people that I did.
Donald Trump said the FBI was leading the charge, and he had no shortage of support from the extreme wing of the extreme MAGA movement. Watch as the cabal of crazy, that is Marjorie Taylor Greene and Roseanne Barr, expand on the narrative, and then we'll see if the DOJ agrees.
Do you think it was an inside job?
I think it was entrapment. The FBI had embedded themselves into all these groups, and it was like an entrapment scheme going on.
Yeah.
And they were antagonizing them and pushing them, just like we saw Ray Epps go into the Capitol. That same thing was happening in all these social media private group chats all over the place. This was and they've talked about it. These January 6th defendants have talked about this extensively, but the media doesn't cover it. And so I think it was building and building and building. I think the Democrats knew it was coming. Nancy Pelosi had been briefed on the intelligence, and she turned down the National Guard. So did the mayor of D.C. publicly in a letter she put out on her own Twitter on January 4th. No National Guard. Nancy Pelosi said no National Guard. So they left it wide open.
Did she say why she didn't want to do National Guard? I don't remember.
She didn't give a reason that I know of, but she turned down the National Guard.
Even the police chief came out saying that everything they said was pretty much a lie.
How lucky for those two. Most of us will live our entire lives without finding our soulmates. Now on to the DOJ bombshell. Watch as ABC breaks down the independent report and then reveals how people like Trump and Greene are twisting a kernel of connection between the FBI and January 6th and weaving it into one of the biggest conspiracy theories of the decade.
We also want to talk about this watchdog report, of course, with the FBI and January 6th. ABC News Justice Department reporter Alex Mallon also live for us in our D.C. bureau. So, Alex, when this report came out, do you think here this perhaps puts to rest some of these false claims surrounding events on January 6th?
Yeah, I mean, Kana, as somebody who's covered January 6th for the past 4 years, you'd like to think that this would be a bookend on the 4-year effort to shift blame away from President-elect Trump for the mob that stormed the Capitol that day. This FBI, or this IG report, finding that there were no undercover FBI agents involved, both at the Capitol or in the crowd at the Ellipse. And it also found that there were 26 FBI informants, paid informants, who were either at the Capitol or part of the protests there in D.C. And then this is something that has kind of been misconstrued over the past 4 years and seized on by far-right figures to suggest that there was some kind of federal involvement in January 6th. But this report makes clear that none of these people were ever directed to either encourage, incite, or take part in the violence that took place at the Capitol. And actually, 3 of these subjects that they are the FBI informants were tasked with FBI field offices for tracking and reporting on specific domestic terrorism cases that the FBI was handling. This was normal law enforcement activity. Obviously, this was a massive crowd, tens of thousands of people there that day. You would expect, some of the far-right extremist figures that we know have been charged in connection with that attack, they were being previously monitored by the FBI. So again, this, you would hope that this puts to rest. I've seen chatter on Twitter from the usual suspects who have, seized on that 26 number, and they still think that the FBI or the IG must have missed something here.
And what more does this report show about the FBI and its general preparedness ahead of January 6th this year?
Yeah, I mean, we saw a lot of criticism of the FBI from, both sides of the aisle after January 6th about how could it have missed this massive mob of former President Trump's supporters attacking the Capitol and conducting this large-scale, attack against a sitting branch of government. And what this report really did find was that they did fail in taking what they called a basic step of canvassing all of their field offices across the country for any intelligence from confidential informants that would have suggested, and actually, in the words of this report, shown that there was chatter about potential acts of violence being taken that day, and even a potential plot on the Capitol. But it really did not, in the end, fault them as much as I expected.
This is the second story I've done today on the deconstruction of one of Donald Trump's big lies. And he is so predictable with this sort of thing that I'm guessing he'll blame the outcome on the Department of Justice being a corrupt agency, one of his enemies from within, something that can only be fixed by him and his Attorney General appointee. And of course the irony is, and there's always irony with Trump, many are predicting that he will be the one to weaponize the DOJ and Attorney General's office like the world has never seen before, and I'll give his nominee for AG, Pam Bondi, and law professor Jessica Levinson the final word to outline the frightening reality to come.
When Republicans take back the White House, you know what's going to happen? The Department of Justice, the prosecutors will be prosecuted, the bad ones. The investigators will be investigated because the deep state, last term for President Trump, they were hiding in the shadows. But now they have a spotlight on them, and they can all be investigated.
The question is whether or not actions follow the rhetoric. And if she does, in fact, do something that we've not seen in modern times with the head of the Department of Justice, which is use that very powerful agency to go after a president's political opponents. That obviously is not what we're accustomed to. It's not what we've seen in the past. It's quite arguably not what the Department of Justice is there to do.